All right, let's kick off the webinar. Thank you everyone who is here today with us for our webinar Data in Restaurants Build Up the Competitive Advantage by Reducing the Change Deficit. My name is Nikolai. I'm doing partnerships for Apicbase and will be the host today. I will also be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to ask them in the normal chat or the Q&A section. And today in the webinar, we will cover how, the why, how, and what of data in hospitality. What's the buzzword change deficit about? And for this, we have invited Nehme Darwiche, the co-founder of Water Hospitality Group, a longtime client of Apicbase and owner of a couple of hospitality brands. Next to him, we have Carl Jacobs, the CEO of Apicbase, who has interviewed hundreds of our clients. But first, let me give you the word to Nehme so he can introduce himself and his business.
Nikolai, Carl, thank you. Very happy to be here. As Nikolai said, my name is Nehme Darwiche. We recently started our business here in Belgium, only 4 years ago. And we are in the hospitality business, and in the food and beverage business is a big part of our hospitality business. We run hotels under Heirloom brands, and we run restaurant and for the first time this month franchisees under the Beiruti brand, Beiruti Express, and Yokoso, which is our Japanese collaborative robots for the sushi brand, and hotels under Heirloom. And we have a small entertainment company where we do pottery under Claymates, which is a brand between here and the Côte d'Azur in France. Very happy to be here and very happy to be part of this webinar.
Carl.
Hello. Yes, hello, good afternoon. Hello, Nehme. Hello, Nikolai. Very happy to be on this webinar. On a topic that is very near to me. I'm Carl. I'm a co-founder of Apicbase. Also, not so long ago, actually 5 years ago. So both very young businesses. Actually, today's webinar is about the change deficit, something that both you and me do know a little bit about, I think. Myself from a more a startup background, and you more from a restaurant hospitality background. Yeah, I'm really happy to pick up the conversation about this topic. But before I do that, maybe I can tell you a little bit about Apicbase, also for the people that join the webinar. Yeah, Apicbase is, of course, a F&B management platform, which is actually focused on growing, scaling restaurants and chains in the hospitality industry. So actually, we focus entirely on the back of house. So that means that we are not a point of sale system, and we are also not a employee management tool. We focus 100% on the food and beverage costs of a business. And what we try to do with our software by implementing different modules depending on the need of the business is to make sure that the food costs that a business has, especially in times like these, go down by better management of your procurement, by better inventory management, by understanding the gap between actual and theoretical food costs, and also by providing tools like production modules, HACCP, and food cost calculation in general. And through this software, basically we are what we call a change enabler. We hope to bring change to the business in a way that, you know, tedious tasks are kind of automated, and that in the end you have a healthy bottom line as a business. And if we succeed in that, I think it's good for the whole industry, because restaurants will become much more profitable, stay in business, and you know, we all have a bright future from that point of view. And yeah, that's what Apicbase in the end is all about.
It replaces a whole department from the old days.
Exactly. So basically what we do is we help the departments at least to make improvements in their section. Mm-hmm. All right. So Nikolai, if you go to the next slide, let me quickly jump into you know, the topic of today. So the topic of today is what I call change deficit, and I'm going to go right straight into this. What you see on this is actually a danger that can happen whenever you are a growing, a scaling business. And basically what I've done is I drew a small axis where you have the number of stores and where you have the number of people in your business. And the longer you wait with digitizing your business, the bigger the digital debt becomes. And basically, it's an almost exponential growth in that sense, or a decline, if you want, because even every time you open a new business, you need more people to be onboarded. So what we suggest and what we say is, if you have a growing business, then you need to implement a software or softwares as quickly as possible. And Nehme, I don't know, what's your vision on this? How do you experience it as an experienced business leader in hospitality?
Actually, it's a little bit like it would be impossible at a certain point to actually adapt, and your competitor will just walk over you. Because the longer you wait, the more impossible it becomes. It's like trying to convince someone today that is maybe so away from technology to start adapting to using augmented reality, for example. He will tell you, no way. It's not possible. And the same, like when the iPhone came out, I remember we had a very hard time convincing my grandmother to use it.
Exactly.
And this is the same. And if you don't start from day one, this digital debt, it's a burden, actually. It's not only a debt, because sometimes it's impossible to pay back because it affects your company culture. So when you're hiring and you're growing and you have these chefs and the great people in your restaurant that are not technology oriented, and suddenly you think, you know what, it's 2027 now, and I want to put on this technology because everybody's using it. You know, guess what? You have people to convince within your own company. It's
Exactly.
not going to be that easy.
Yeah, so I already hear quite some interesting topics which we will also discuss later on in the discussion. So let's move into the next slide, Nikolai. And of course, one of the things that we need to address, and I stole that one from you actually, Nehme, is growth is inevitable actually. So I mean, even if you're not planning to open up multiple restaurants, still growth in terms of turnover, etc., is
profitability,
what's driving you.
Yeah. We are humans. Everything around us in the universe tells us, from a plant to an animal to us, that we grow day by day. And you're right. If you don't grow in numbers, you don't grow in business model, you want to grow that one single unit into more profitable or more sales. If you actually want to survive, that's called growth.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, a friend of mine recently and us, we had to adapt in the inflation time. And I have no clue how did people do it without having a software that is intelligent enough to help them out. How did they just change all the prices on their menu? Because that's suicide. If you don't do price elasticity on different menus and different items based on your knowledge of the current market, the vegetable prices were changing every day. How did they do it? If you don't have a technology-driven software behind you, how did you do it? You didn't do it right. This is, if someone did it, you didn't do it right.
All right.
We have an advantage over our competitors is because we're very technology-driven.
All right, that's really valuable information, of course. I mean, and when you do let's say a correction of your prices in terms of inflation, can you tell me a little bit like how do you actually go into work and what are the steps for you to take a decision to increase or decrease pricing? Do you have kind of a process for that?
What we do is we try to categorize the menu items, all of them, the 128 items, in 4 categories based on popularity and profitability. Now, the popularity is very easy to get because that comes from a point of sales. But the profitability is so variable, especially these days when we cannot even determine the lettuce and tomato prices. So we rely on Apicbase, who has a menu engineering tool. So Apicbase takes the information from our POS, and it's also updated every time we receive a delivery request. We put it in the software, and it updates the actual cost of those items because we have standardized recipes that we follow in our restaurants. And so we know the actual cost of every item. At the end, they all fall into 4 categories. One is called dogs, which is low profitability and low popularity. These ones, we try to get rid of them. And the best ones are called stars, which have high profitability and high popularity. And there's plow horse and puzzles, which have either high popularity and low profitability or low popularity and high profitability. Anything that has high profitability, we add it to our must market. So we start marketing them heavily. The whole team goes on sales trainings, they understand the product, they taste the product, they live with the product, they learn the story of the product. We give it to our digital sales force that also goes online and hammers the whole world with it. With the stars is where we use price elasticity. We know people want it, we know people love it, we know we have profitability. So we make a decision to either decide to become socially correct and sells a lot more of it. Big example, our falafel sandwich. We brought it down from €9 to €5, but we increased our turnover actually as a company with both restaurant by €60,000 by changing the price of sandwiches. And we were very careful because we realized actually that the meat prices were going through the roof, and people say, you know what, that you don't need to be a genius to realize this. I'll tell you what, we realized the cauliflower price was going through the roof. It went from 4.5 to 10.5. It was a signature dish for us. You know, we took it out of the menu. We actually create scarcity. We said we will only sell 10 per day. And if you want it, this is now how much is the price. And it worked. But we cannot do this without data. People say, I have a gut feeling. I always say, yes, you're right. But that gut feeling is based on a lot of information. And if you don't have those information, you're confused.
Yeah, absolutely true. So I learned that the question marks you start marketing, and the stars you execute a certain price elasticity out of that. I also have, let's say, you know, because you know this sounds like you've done this quite a lot, and I think a lot of people that are in this call will definitely take lessons from this home. But growth is inevitable, but growth also means chaos. And how did you experience that? You say you're 4 years in the business. How do you experience that chaos?
I get my ass continuously kicked. This is how I experience. Growth is pain. It's so painful that I think I'm just so used to it. It's called epiphedrine, but it's also humble. Every time growth brings with it situations that are either expected or unexpected. So what you try to do is to shield yourself as much as possible with more skills and experience you gain. One of those things that I learned from the last 17 times I started the company and is to actually rely on technology. I also love processes and procedures. So I try to set up standards that rely on softwares and maintain the ability to make decisions based on true facts. We have a saying here in our office. We say we do not live in the comfortable illusion, but we enjoy the bitter truth. And the bitter truth comes from data. So with growth, I tell you, it is pain, but it is one pain that anyway we cannot avoid. So we try to shield ourselves as much as possible. Technology and software seems to be the most reliable. The second thing, as you know, in one of our brands is we develop collaborative robot with a Japanese company, and this is why we are ahead of our competitors. But mainly, it all goes down to innovation through items that we can depend on and shield ourselves. So we know that growth has 200 pain points. At least let's cover 100 with those that are controllable. And one of those hundreds happens to be a big item of it. Happens to be technology, softwares.
Yes. All right. That actually is quite interesting to hear. And also, you know, when we look at how businesses like yours, but also hundreds of others are actually, you know, managing their growth and trying to overcome their chaos, it's basically to manage 3 main things in their business. And the first one is actually basically concept. I think for me, and that is what differs the hospitality from any other business out there. I think the concept is one of the main pillars within a business. I mean, you can't just make food. You need to produce this in a fantastic environment, which gives a kind of an atmosphere which people like and want to come back to. So the second pillar that we see in businesses is Nikolai, if you go to the next slide. Okay, thank you. The organizational structure. For me, that is one of the question marks today in the market, is how do I organize my teams in a market where there's so little people available, and where there's so much work and so little people available. And for me, this organizational structure has proven to be one of the pivotal things that bring success to a business, basically. What we see in the market is that if you structure your business in a way where the founder or the let's say the CEO of the business still does counting in the morning, cooking during the day, and serving in the evening, then that business, even if it's especially, I mean, if it's going to scale, it's bound to fail. Huh? So for us, what we see is successful businesses basically succeed in putting the right people in the right place. So that means that you have operational guys in the right position. You have a procurement guy. You have people that know exactly how to do the floor, how to work the floor, how to cook the dishes. How do you experience that, Nehme? How do you have your organizational structure organized?
Well, to answer the concept question also, I am with you 100%. Sure. If you think you are in the food business, if someone here thinks that they are selling food, in my humble opinion, it's, no, you're selling experience. Each one of us out there in that competitive landscape, if you're doing even delivery from a cost kitchen, you're selling experience. I will tell you how you know this, because today we as a society can even judge takeaway boxes. So it's not the food. We can even judge prices. We can judge speed, everything. So the concept is very important. I get more comments on our music than I get about our hummus. The second thing is organizational structure. You touched a very important point for us. We learned, and we're still learning, that form follows function. This is not even something that we learned in university. I learned this through architecture. Form follows function means that we have learned, our company name is called Water, that we have to change shape all the time. And then we learn that in our organizational structure, people come and go. And this is inevitable too. Great people come and go. We also learned that our business can be done without the highly skilled requirement. So if everybody here is on the call, if you know Beiruti or you don't, if you know Yokoso sushi or you don't, I invite you to go and experience it. And I'm going to spill out a big secret right now. We don't have one chef. We don't have one executive chef. We don't have one executive sous chef. We don't even have a chef de partie. We don't have a chef. We don't have anyone with cooking skills. What we have is we have a great, amazing amount of people that play volleyball. So if you play volleyball, you know that you can never stand in the same spot throughout the game. You have to turn every time that the ball reverses. And this is what we do. So we have standardized recipes. We have access to Apicbase from everyone. We have food scientists that put recipes together based on taste buds of where we're doing business. And then we have immense training schedule every day. And no one can just stand in their place. So you cannot just be a waiter. You have to be a waiter, you have to go to the Japanese, you have to make sushi, makis, etc. And then you have to come to the Beiruti, you have to learn how to serve hummus, etc. And that flow of people helped us. So this is totally new. Actually, if I go back to university and I tell this to my professors, they will say that I am insane. Insanity works because we are in a tight market where skilled people are not available.
Yeah, exactly. So basically how you solve the shortage on the market is making sure that people are in a sense homo universalis, where they do the whole A to Z of a business.
Yeah, but what we do is we minimize and simplify the business. Everybody has access to the recipes. There is no hidden information for me. Everybody has access to the recipes. Also, just to be clear, we do have one centralized location where we make items that we believe are very high importance to our experience, which is hummus and baba ganoush. So these two are like the holy grail for us. They are done in one location and they are distributed every day at 4 a.m.
All right.
The items, the rest of the 126 can be done by anybody with or without experience after 4 days of training.
All right. And in terms of organizational structure, and now we've been talking about, let's say, one outlet, one unit. How do you manage, and I hear you also have a central production unit. How do you, control all of these separate units? Do you have an HQ? How is the HQ organized?
Yeah, for us, this is also a part of our business that's very important, is we have a head office that runs all the businesses. How flexible we are in the operation, I can tell you how hard we are in the head office. In the head office is where we don't barge. We're heavily invested in technology. I'm gonna just, and we really like what we do. Here, I don't know if you can see, but all these screens behind me over there on the wall, these are screens that gives us feedback back from the outlets in terms of sales, in terms of cost, all live information. In the head office, our structure is that we are the skeleton. So it's very important that we stick to what we do. This is where here the ordering happens. This is where the receiving happens, where the technology happens, where the data is made into reports that are digested and can be used for decision making. Here we are really firm. We're a chain and that chain is complete. And when it comes to the restaurant, we're flexible. So, and here we are heavily software dependent. That's the truth. But we can depend on softwares because they don't get sick.
All right. So that basically brings us seamlessly to the last pillar of the organization as the systematic way of working. So if I hear correctly, bringing in the consistency, making sure that you don't barge on your HQ. I mean, that's exactly looking for that systemic way of working. How difficult is it to maintain that systemic way of working? Is that something you struggle with? And are there any tips you can give the people in the call about how they can make sure that a systematic way of working is really implemented in their organization?
I think you have to know what does it matter for you. Me, I make decisions based on the outcome, which means that I always think in the end of my mind, how does success look like for me? Success looks for me like I have simple KPIs like everybody, that I want this online reputation in numbers, and I want this profitability in EBITDA. To be able to achieve those, I understood that I need to maintain quality and be consistent in my experience. So we have something called the 360 degrees guest journey. That guest journey is holy. So we follow the manager step by step, and we make sure that our restaurant is following it by doing something called leading quality assurance. So we send every week our own quality inspector, and also we send mystery customers. So they actually experience the restaurant in full, from the toilets to the taste of the hummus. The second thing is that we don't have heavy reporting systems, but we have sincerely a heavy checklist system. And everything leads, as everybody knows here, we are very heavily technology driven. And we use Tenzo, for example, for flash food cost, flash labor cost, and he can only get that information from Apicbase. And he's like, we use Lightspeed, and so all these technologies are here. In the morning car at 10:30, you will find that everybody that is somebody in our company, an executive that has the ability to make changes in our company and affect it positively or negatively, is on that call. And the call starts with something called the guest success report. So in the morning, we know which outlet was visited yesterday, what were the results, what were the great points, so we call them top 5, and what are the 5 points that you need to concentrate on. And then we go through the numbers. We're a restaurant chain, although, me, I like to call us chain next year when we hit 12 restaurants at least. Today we're at 6. We know what was the best selling item in every outlet, in every area we do business in. We know what is the best starter and the lowest starter. We also would know, because the manager will report, if there was an increase in price in anything that is food related. That morning briefing sets the tone to the changes that we need to do by the day. We used to wait before. So we used to wait until we do the financial meeting of every month, and then make decision. That was a big mistake. Because today we are in a high intensity changing environment. COVID, lockdown, taxes, electricity, inflation, deflation, banking, no banking. We actually live in a time that tomorrow we don't know what's going to happen, but you know what? We know what happened yesterday, so at least we can change today. And that high intensity changes helps us to stay competitive. Me, I also believe in blue ocean strategy, not red ocean strategy. I like to walk away from my competitors 3 years always in advance. So my team and I focus on the day-to-day operation. And Caroline and I, and we have a small executive team here, we focus on what's going to happen in 3 years. But that is revisited once every quarter. But the day-to-day, I don't know how other people do it, to be honest with you, because I cannot see with my mind how can it be possible to win, because survival is good, but it's not. You don't ask someone, you know, what is your goal when you wake up, and he tells you, I want to survive the day.
That's correct.
Ambitious. If you have ambition, and so do we. So
yeah, and actually, I mean, you know, when we have these 3 pillars, you know, identified, and when you work with them and you succeed in getting a great concept, making sure that the right people are in the right spot, and that you have a systematic way of working, I think, and you've mentioned it quite a bit, for us, looking at our customers, what lacks in most businesses is actually what we have pointed out in the middle of this slide, and you know, that's actually data. For us, data is really at the core of making sure that you become a successful business. And you know, if I look into the portfolio of our customers, but also to many of our prospects, who then finally decide maybe not to go with systems because they find it, you know, daunting, or they have second thoughts or cold feet to go through with it. My answer is very simple. If you don't have the data, you cannot improve. What gets measured actually gets managed. That's basically the basic idea of implementing software systems. And most people say, yeah, but I'm doing business 20 years already, and I've never managed it the way that you say you should manage it. And I think that's you know, where they might make a big mistake. For me, even if you've never done it beforehand, then I think it's very, very important that you start as soon as possible. Because from the day that you start managing your data and capturing data, basically the day after, you can already improve on the data that you collected before. And that's exactly what I hear you saying as well. So for me, I mean, answering the question, would you manage 40 million euros a year, or even only 2 or 3 or 5 million euros a year in Excel, or for that matter, on pen and paper? I mean, the answer should clearly be no. So that's really something that we can say with confidence today, that, you know, being in the market without software.
Sorry. 2 things I want to tell you. I heard something a couple of years ago, actually, and it really resonated with me, and I hope it helps everybody here on the call. I heard someone in a conference says, get Uber before you get Kodak. And it really stayed with me. It really stayed with me. Where the hell is Kodak today? Where is Kodak? It disappeared, no data. The second thing is, I want to give a live, real example. So Apicbase does inventory management. So you know exactly, because you count how much you have in inventory. If you don't know, you end up always buying the wrong numbers. We actually made a saving of 190,000 euro when we started using the inventory model. We realized that we had a manager that really is very clean, and for some reason likes to keep a lot of chemicals. And he was ordering so many chemicals, thinking in his head, you know what? It's gonna stay. It doesn't get bad. and etc. And this is one of the examples that costed us around 17,000 euro. But in total, we reduced our inventory so much because that's cash sitting in the basement or in the store somewhere. So data is so important because it lets you see. Without it, we are blind in managing any business.
Exactly. Exactly. And then also something that you mentioned before to me is the fact that, you know, getting data is also getting competitive advantage in the end.
Yeah. You know, I was listening to you and I heard you saying, I tell my clients, you have to do this. 5 years ago, if someone says, oh, why you're using software? It's expensive. I would always say, you're right. Don't use software, because I know that we're going to finish him off in maximum 2 years. We're going to walk over that competitor and close him down. Today, I'm a much better person because I also learned that doing good in the world rewards by good. So I'm a better competitor. And today, I really take the effort to tell other people, please compete with us, because it's going to get boring right here. Yeah. Today, you know, I am very humbled, and I get humbled even if I don't want to. But we are a leading Lebanese brand. And I go to my Lebanese colleagues, and these are some of them are from my own hometown. And I really work very hard. I show them my own numbers so I can convince them. Because I think today, the way that I think of competition is very different than I did 5 years ago. And I think everybody's too late. Everybody's too late.
All right.
We know where the world is going, and I think everybody's too late.
All right. Just to go back to, you know, the start topic of this and the actual topic of this presentation, and the change deficit. And actually, basically, what I wanted to tell the audience and also from experience, we already quickly explained this diagram. So basically, the earlier you start, if you have a growth plan, and if the plan is to really open up multiple stores and scale, then I think the earlier you start with digitization the better, actually, even if it might mean that you have a bit of overhead in the beginning. But if you look into, you know, the dangers of not doing that, because sometimes it's more interesting to talk about, you know, what you will experience in later stages. Nikolai, if you go to the next slide. So one of those things that we experience a lot with businesses that failed to adapt early on is that, you know, change management becomes increasingly more difficult once you have certain operations going. How do you experience change in the company?
Well, it's like trying to turn a 6-wheel truck and trying to turn around a bicycle. The faster you do it, the better it is. If you install change as a way of business, it's also very important. But I can tell you from previous experience, not in Belgium, you know, I used to do business in Abu Dhabi. And at a certain point, I wanted to implement a new software of revenue. We used to have hotels, so of revenue forecasting, I could not. We had 1,600 employees then, and I could not for a week, I could not for 2 years, with all the training that were possible, because the culture became too hard. It was too much Excel sheet, it was too much pen and paper. We in the corporate office had zero overview. I'm talking really not 2 or 3, but more years ago. And we could not. And you cannot, you know, when you want to implement change, you cannot go and change your whole team. No. Small or big, you know, and even if you have a restaurant with 5 people, or you have a company with 500, what are you going to do? Kick out the 5 people because now you decided to become intelligent and competitive? You cannot. So it's always better to start as early as possible, because it's going to become very hard. And I learned the hard way, Carl. So today I start with myself. I start with myself. I always want to learn first.
Yeah, it's actually something that we also experience. Agility and change are two things that are very, very important in any company, and making sure that you stay in a speedboat rather than in some kind of big container ship is really important. And also, you mentioned it, the fact that, you know, once you have so many people working for you, the more people you have working for you, the more people need actually training, and that's also a very expensive matter. And actually, I can tell you that, you know, a Dutch bank a few years ago, before COVID, this was, kind of made a calculation on how much training costs in hospitality, and they said there was a 5 billion euro deficit of people needing to be trained and retrained because of high turnover and because of the fact that, you know, systems weren't implemented in the right moment. So really, I mean, starting early will give you a huge edge on making sure that you stay out of that digital debt. And, you know, also, one of the other things that's really important, Nikolai, is the fact that once you've implemented a certain workflow, with or without software, and in many cases, unfortunately, without software, it's extremely difficult to change that workflow.
Yeah,
and
yeah. They come at you with one phrase, but we've done it this way for years.
Exactly.
This is how we've done it for years. This is
And
how we do it all the time.
Yes, exactly. And even if they have been moaning about that way forever, even at that moment, and when you propose the change, they suddenly will love the old way of working. So that's the weird thing, how difficult it is to actually change existing workflows in a company once it becomes a bit bigger, and once it becomes like more than, let's say, the founding team that has a vision and a way of going forward.
When I walk in Brussels, I always pass by the Bourse, and I always pass by Metropole Hotel.
You what? You sorry? You?
I pass by the Bourse because our restaurant is next to the Bourse,
Yes.
and I walk and I pass by Metropole Hotel. So Metropole Hotel is like an amazing, amazing, beautiful piece of history, but it's history. And it is because it was filled with dinosaurs that did not change, that did not update their softwares, their own personal softwares. And for me, it's a continuous reminder. I sit there and I look and I see this beautiful, amazing building where I remember coming with my parents as a kid, and I remember eating waffles, and now it's closed. It's closed. We are deprived of a piece of history because someone decided they are dinosaurs. And this is the way that they have been doing things, and it works that way.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a very saddening thing to realize, actually. Yeah. So, of course, there's so many other things that, you know, are you have to take into account. But I don't know, Nikolai, are there already questions, or I'm pointing to the audience now. Are there any questions that have popped up during the first 35 minutes of this conversation that we could address?
No, there haven't been any really big questions there. We got one though. Let me get it back. 1 second. Yeah, how does your current tech stack work, Nehme? Some people noticed you mentioned some names, but they were really interested in like the full suite you are using at the moment.
If you want to disclose.
Yeah. Me, I like people that they catch up to me so I can work a little bit harder. Actually, what we do is the following. We use Strobo for our scheduling, and we use Strobo to be able to calculate our labor cost, which here in Europe seems to be very important. We use Lightspeed as a POS system where we collect also items sold by location, popularity of items, etc. We use Apicbase for inventory management, for procurement, for menu engineering, for standardized recipes. We use the whole model, and we use Tensor as a digestive software. So in it, we receive daily reports, and in it also, and in Apicbase, we have the ability to use AI for forecasting. So, and before COVID, we used barcodes on the table, and we encourage people to use Ask Emma, which is, before Ask Emma, we used to use Trivac. So in this way, we have the ability to give people personalized menus. So depending on their profiles, they can receive a different menu with different size of pictures and etc. based on what they ordered last time, or if they visited this restaurant, and their usual average transaction value. This is where we are today. Now we are experimenting with augmented reality when it comes to menus and scanning barcodes. I would really like to, for us as a company to be leaders in this. On our scales, we're also experimenting in accepting tokens in the form of a loyalty program. So this is where we are in technology. That's software. In terms of technology hardware, I am a big fan of collaborative robots. So I think that we humans are made for creativity, and I think that we humans will always find work, but why not find a collaborative machine that can help us do our job more consistent and more easy? So I will give you 3 examples quickly for whoever asked. For example, we have an intelligent oven, a smart oven, like you have a smartphone. That oven, you have to tell him what did you put in it, and he will beep to tell you to take it out when it's actually baked correctly. We have something that we helped develop, which brings out the perfect menaish. I don't know if you know what is that. If you don't know, visit our website or go to. And but mainly, I think the easiest hanging fruit is that you always need a tech, like you called it very well, a tech deck to put you in competition. And I'm always on the lookout. Always on the lookout, what can give me 1% advantage. If it gives me 1% advantage, I am in it 100%. So I hope that answered your question, and feel free to ask more if you have.
Yeah, I think so. We got one more while you were talking. It was, so we talked about growth. So you can either scale in amount of outlets, you can scale their revenue. What are your main drivers of growth? Is it mainly the more outlets, or mainly revenue, or a combination of the two?
In short, like always, I will share what we're working on. So we have these brands, as you know, Beiruti. Beiruti is a dine-in restaurant that also does deliveries and does catering. Beiruti Express is a pickup and a delivery unit. To build the Beiruti, you need €1 million. To build the Beiruti Express, you need 120,000 euro. Yokoso is our sushi brand, and we are also starting a new brand in November called Lombardi Pizza from New York. It's the first pizzeria in New York. We're bringing it here to Belgium, to Ghent first. And what we're gonna do next, so current revenue driver is obviously dine-in sales, 30% is only delivery. But in the future, as a company, we're setting up an office to service Germany, Belgium, and France. For me, you know, geographically in a business world, for me, they are the same country. They have the first and the second biggest economy in Europe, and we happen to live in Belgium that sits in the center of all of it, and we have great food. So it's the best place to do business, best place to live, and you get to service all this market. What we would like to do is to start selling these franchises. So me as a company, our line of revenue is gonna switch from selling food to selling experiences. The next brand that we're developing is called Kitchens. So Kitchens is a brand that combines all our brands in one store, where we would like to be a hybrid between a supermarket and between a restaurant. So you could order from us for delivery, you could order from us to come and pick up yourself. You can walk in and pick up from a shelf or from a live cooking station. And you know how we're gonna achieve all of this? Is because we know what people want. And you know how, because not because I can read the future, because I can pull out data from every location we are in. Some people ask me, why the hell did you open here? And I always say, because now I get to learn about the street. Now I get to learn about the city. Every day for the next 3 years, I'm gonna be learning about every location we have, so I know what we can do in the future and what we must sell and what we must not sell. So I hope that also answers your question.
It does, it does.
Fantastic.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
answer actually also, because my last question for you, Nehme, was what brings the future? And I think you just answered that more clearly than ever. Thank you very much for that. Actually, basically, yeah, I think for me, we still have 1-2 minutes left before we go into the end of the webinar. I'd like to summarize quickly what we've discussed today. And for me, basically, I think what I learned from you also, Nehme, is that digitization is one of the key elements in your organization. It's finding that systematic way of working with the right people in the experience that you actually want to sell to your audience. Also in terms of making sure that you can do the growth and make the growth happen that you foresee, is make sure that you start early on. And as you say, people say software is expensive, and then you say, well, you think that, let's do this our way. So I think those are two takeaways that you need that people could take away from this webinar, and that brings us actually to the closing stages of this webinar. If there's no further questions from the audience, I think I'm very honored to have had you on the webinar, Nehme, and thank you very much for giving so much insights in how you do business. And yeah, I also thank the audience for staying with us and actually growing during the webinar. So thank you very much for staying with us, and hope to see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you both for doing the webinar. I would like to remind everyone who attended that a recording will also be sent over of this webinar. Share it with anyone who you know might find this interesting. And if there's any other questions, you can always contact us through our website and just say hi and ask away. Thank you very much, and see you another time.